Morning.
So your morning was like,
Was
morning.
Oh,
Because the internet.
that is no, that's not because the internet. That's how I did it. Morning. Morning.
Morning.
That so threw you off then, didn't it? Because I
Yeah,
did
the
it round the
beginning,
wrong way.
morning. Yeah.
Morning.
Flip reversed it, didn't you? That's
I
gonna
did.
everybody listening is gonna go, this isn't perplexed. What's going on?
What? I don't recognise this at all. I'll switch it off. Please don't.
Yeah. Please don't. Okay, so first and foremost, I want to give out some thank yous to our listeners, because the Spotify, I can't remember what it's called. What's it called? The Spotify Wrapped, it came out yesterday, and it tells you all what people are listening to and the listeners and where they're listening and things like that. And it just made me so happy to see that
Us?
people, well, both of us, because I sent it to you immediately.
Yes.
That people are listening and continuing to listen, and it fills my heart with pure joy.
Our hearts.
Our hearts. I'm just speaking for me. I love you guys.
Well, I love you all too.
Yeah.
No, it's to be honest, it's come at a really good time for us as well, hasn't it? Because I think recent times have been testing, to say the least, and it's we're never sure if we're giving people like what they like or what they want, or we get nothing but great feedback, but we never know if sometimes we're doing bits that you guys think, oh, sick of that. But we seem to be all right, because we're top 10 podcast, we're top 5 podcast, we're top number 1 for in the hundreds.
So really great figures, and was really happy about that this morning. And also for our other listeners as well that have been listening from the start, and they know of my cancer journey. As of today, when we were recording, it is my last ever chemo.
Yay!
So that's also a very joyous occasion.
Oh my goodness, it so is.
Yeah,
so is.
So right in time for Christmas.
Yeah, Christmas present.
Yeah.
What a better Christmas present. There are
no more poison.
no more being injected with poison.
Yeah.
I know, that's something to be celebrated indeed.
So we're also, I believe we've run out of random blams about ourselves. So
well, I mean, I haven't, because on a daily basis I create new random blams, as do you, but it's just whether or not we choose to admit them.
Yeah. So we are focusing our random blams on generally the topics that we cover. So random blam, go.
Reggie Cray, from the Crays.
The Cray, yeah.
Reggie Cray was friends with my nan, or his mum was. And when my nan was on hard times, he used to pay her rent for her.
That's interesting.
Bless him. I am a fan of the Crays.
Yeah. said not a lot of people.
Said no one ever.
Yeah, that's really interesting.
Yeah.
Okay.
And you?
My random blam is on a very similar topic to the story of today. So my random blam is about the Bermuda Triangle.
Oh.
And I don't really know much about the Bermuda Triangle. So some of it was really interesting for me. But so the Bermuda Triangle is one of the highest incidents of UFO sightings ever.
Oh, really?
Yeah, over the like the spot, the Bermuda Triangle. I don't know why I can't say that.
Well, you didn't spell it either, because you told me it was the Bennington Triangle.
Well, that's what the story is. The story is the Bennington Triangle. Yeah. So the Bermuda Triangle, something different, has the most sightings of UFOs ever, and some people believe that is what accounts for all the disappearances. Some people believe that actually it's not UFOs that necessarily come and abduct people. They think that it's actually a portal to another world.
Oh my God, that's similar to that thing that I was telling you about this morning.
The big hole, yeah.
The big hole. Coming soon.
Okay, so Random Blam's done.
Random Blam's done.
And now you've heard about the Bermuda Triangle, I am going to tell you the story of the Bennington Triangle.
Oh, it sounds like a mint, doesn't it?
like from a celebrations box.
No, like an after dinner mint. Have a Bennington's Triangle. Oh yes, please. Does. I'm sure there's something like that.
That's not what it is.
Oh, well.
The Bennington Triangle. Now, a lot of people obviously know about the Bermuda Triangle and its strange happenings and mysteriousness. So this is the Bennington Triangle, and it's an area located in the southwestern corner of Vermont.
Oh,
the triangle,
nowhere near.
Nowhere near. Completely different area.
Oh, multiple triangles. Can I just say, do you think there's any connection between, UFOs, portals, and the fact that the Bennington Triangle, Bermuda Triangle, and then there's the pyramids that they say are linked to UFOs? Oh my God, have I just stumbled on
You've cracked
the answers to the universe? You are all welcome. We aim to please.
I have no idea. I don't know why. But the triangle is surrounded by the towns of Glastonbury and Somerset, and it covers an area of about 100 square miles and is inside the area of Bennington, the Bennington County. So being not from America, I find it quite difficult to understand the geography sometimes of different areas. So I've tried to research it and map it, and just so I could get a better understanding. But if I get any of it wrong, I do apologise. Right. So I'm going to give you a small overview of the history of Glastonbury, and then the surrounding area of Glastonbury as well, because that is where the Bennington Triangle is, and the history of Glastonbury, it kind of sets the tone for why it kind of becomes so synonymous, I think. So Glastonbury was established in 1761, and it was unpopular from the get-go.
Oh.
So Benning Wentworth, who is the founder of Bennington, drew the boundaries of the town on a map without ever stepping foot there. He just went there, right there. That is where I want my town to be. So the town was actually built on rugged mountainous terrain, and it wasn't a settlement that had been founded because of its prosperous environment or its transport links or anywhere that a settlement would normally be established. And between the years of 1761 and 1791, only 6 families inhabited the town.
Not popular.
These first settlers found life on Glastonbury Mountain very difficult, as would residents ever after. And by the 1800s, they had all packed up and left. I say all, I mean the 6 families that lived there had all picked up and left, and they had actually been replaced by 8 entirely different families. However, during the 1800s, like the beginning of the 1800s, after the Civil War had ended, businesses in the nearby Bennington County saw an opportunity in the vast wooded areas around Glastonbury. They wanted to use it for logging and things like that. So the population steadily grew, and it kind of grew so much that a railway line was actually built from Bennington up to the Glastonbury town to transport the goods kind of down and to transport people up and things like that. And it was the steepest railroad ever built. And parts of it still remain there to this day.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I wouldn't advise going to see it because you'll see why. The logging business was booming in Glastonbury, obviously surrounded by trees. It was a very, very wooded area, and sawmills were later erected, and brick-built kilns had also been made as well to turn the wood into charcoal. And by 1880, the population had grown to a staggering 241 people.
Oh, it's far too crowded for me.
By the late 1880s, the mountain, though, had been cleared, like pretty much cleared of nearly all of its mature trees. And so the town's economy dropped dramatically. And in 1889, it became so kind of derelict that they just ceased operation of everything. The railroad shut down, and it kind of that was it. In 1894, so a few years afterwards, the town was given a makeover. They wanted to try and reinvent the town from this logging business that it had been into a summer mountainous travel resort.
Oh, that's a step, isn't it?
Yep. So the existing buildings that were there were turned into like a hotel. So I think like the logging cabins were turned into hotels. The sawmills that were turned into like a casino. And then they added like kind of fancy transport carts onto the railroad to transport people up and down the mountain. But 3 years later, the railroad and most of the buildings were completely wrecked by a huge flood that they had. God. So the deforestation of the area, the removal of all the trees had left it kind of open to the elements. So they said, had the trees still have been there, the flood would have been a lot less. But because it was kind of so open, the rain, it was kind of like a mudslide. It kind of just washed everything down. So it ruined the railroad and everything else that they tried to build up. So no other attempts to reinvent the town were ever made. And today, based on the census in 2020, a grand total of 9 people live in this.
Yeah, see, that's more my thing.
Yeah.
9 people in the whole town. 9. Perfect.
Yeah. And I believe in the nearby Somerset area, I think there's something like 6. I think there's less people in that town. And there are like the house, when I say houses, they're not really houses, kind of like shacks and things that people live in, have got really aggressive signage out the front warning people not to trespass and, you know, don't come by here. And so they're very reclusive.
Get off my land.
Get off my land. So the Bennington Triangle, it was named by a gentleman called Joseph Citro, and it was based mostly on the strange disappearances in that area over the course of 5 years, from 1945 to 1950. But he recognized a pattern from the disappearances, and then kind of like delved into the area, the history of the area, and he found a lot more mystery and all like strange things that had happened, more so than these disappearances. And so he named the area the Bennington Triangle, much like the Bermuda. Obviously got his inspiration from the Bermuda Triangle. It was said that Native Americans, from the very start, before the start of the Glastonbury town, the Native Americans didn't step foot on Glastonbury Mountain unless it was to bury their dead. They believed that the whole mountain was cursed land, and they said that the four winds met there. So it was kind of like old folklore that the Native Americans said that the Glastonbury mountain was cursed, and they always mentioned about these four winds. It's where the four winds meet. And so, like I say, most people say that this is old Native American folklore, but there is actually some truth behind it. So the wind patterns, and normally you've got, a southeasterly wind or the wind does change direction.
Yeah.
But the wind pattern on Glastonbury Mountain is so erratic that the weather changes so suddenly, and the plants actually grow at odd angles. So plants normally grow in the direction of the wind, obviously, because that's where the wind sweeps all the seeds or whatever else.
Yeah, you get trees that are really bent over to the right or something, and you know that 9 times out of 10 the wind's going to be coming from
that way.
The left. Yeah.
But it was just so erratic there that the plants grew up in every which way possible. There wasn't like an area where all the ferns were, because that's where the seeds dropped or whatever. But they were just, it was everywhere. The Native Americans also believed that atop Glastonbury Mountain there was an enchanted cairn, and the cairn, I'll go through what a cairn is as well, because I didn't know what it was, but they believed that this enchanted cairn ate people. It was a man-eating stone. So a cairn, stone.
Oh,
a cairn is a collection of stones. They generally mark different waypoints on like trails. So you do generally find them on mountains and things like that. And they're just like, not boulders, just kind of like the size of a foot or something, stones all gathered up in a circle, I guess.
Okay.
All on top of each other. And they just marked different waypoints. Sometimes they'd have like a sign in the middle.
And there was a man-eating one on this one.
There was just so happened to be a man-eating one. So because they were there to mark the points on the trails and things, there were actually a collection of them near it's a place that they called Long Trail through the Glastonbury Mountain. But they were there a long time before the trail was ever made. So there's a lot of confusion between professionals as to why these cairns were actually there, and professionals would go there and sort of try and date the rocks. So they're all covered in like moss and algae and all sorts of nonsense, and they found that the moss actually was prehistoric on these rocks. So they've been there for the millions of years.
Goodness.
So and they predate any making of the trails. They predate the starting of the town. Nobody knows why they're there or how they were there. They're stacked one on top of each other in a circle. They're not haphazard. They're not just, stones that have been found. It's a built structure.
That's mad, isn't it?
The moss on it is prehistoric. So it's a very strange, almost like a Stonehenge, where nobody knows how the stones got there or why they're there or what purpose they're there for. But we'll come back to the man-eating stone later on. So the next strange thing about the Bennington Triangle was the Glastonbury Wild Man.
Oh.
So the Glastonbury Wild Man was perhaps the first documented bizarre happening in the area. And it was in 1867. Numerous residents reported encountering a cave-dwelling wild man who was known to terrorize women in the towns of Bennington and Glastonbury. Witnesses reported that the man, he would pull back his long coat, he would reveal his entirely nude self, and he would wave a pistol at them and then run back off into the woods. The women would obviously run off absolutely terrified, and they'd go to their local men and they would grab their pitchforks. They'd go out searching, but they never ever found this Glastonbury wild man. Nobody knows who he was, or he was just never identified. He was never found. In 1892, in the town of Fayville, which is considered to be the heart of what is now known as the Bennington Triangle, A 38-year-old jobber, and I looked up what a jobber was because I had no idea, and it was just somebody that kind of ran the books, I think, that kind of, I think you would call like an accountant nowadays.
Okay.
So 38-year-old jobber John Crowley was bludgeoned to death with a rock by a fellow mill worker, Henry McDowell. And nobody knows what provoked the attack. It was completely unprovoked and it was unwarranted, and it was completely out of the blue. But after realizing what he'd done, Henry McDowell skipped town. He hopped onto the nearest train and he attempted to flee Canada. He didn't know why he'd done it or, what had come over him.
Oh, okay. I was going to say no one knew, but I mean, did they ask him? But
well, he did eventually get caught, and he told authorities that he heard voices in his head, and they told him that he needed to obviously kill this other worker. But he was very swiftly committed to a mental asylum. But he never ended up going there. I think on the way to him being locked up into the mental asylum, he managed to escape by hiding in a coal train, and he fled into the surrounding woods in the Bennington Triangle, and he was never seen again. So the folklore around that is that he still lives there to this day, and he still terrorizes people, and nobody knows what became of him at all.
Got eaten.
Perhaps. 5 years later, in 1897, John Harbour, he set off into an area of the Bennington Triangle to hunt, and he was later found killed by a single gunshot wound. His body had been found behind like a giant tree, and it was clear that it had been hidden there. His rifle was beside him, placed carefully, still fully loaded, and no suspects were ever found. They did an extensive search of the area to try and track who might have killed him, but the murder went unsolved, and there was never any suspects or anybody ever found. And for more than 2 centuries, there have been numerous sightings of a Bigfoot-like creature in Glastonbury Mountain, and this became known as the Bennington Monster. One of the first reported sightings occurred in the early 1800s, when a stagecoach full of passengers that was on its way up the mountain during a storm. What happened was, as they was going up, the downpour was so heavy that it actually washed away the road. So as it was going up, the road was then completely washed away. So it forced the coach to stop. The coach driver got out to see what he could do, and he noticed some huge footprints in the mud, and they were too large to be human. But he was confused because nobody makes their way on foot up the mountain. There was nobody else around other than the coachload of people that he had, and it was quite fresh mud as well, because the rain had just washed away all of the road. So it was very fresh. So the footprints had to be left there quite recently. And then while he was pondering what on earth was going on, the coach was attacked by a giant creature, and it ran straight into the side of the stagecoach, and it knocked it on its side. And all of the passengers, they were obviously terrified. All they could see was a glaring pair of eyes in the darkness, like bright, brilliant white staring eyes. And it was just this creature was just stood there staring at this stagecoach that had been knocked over. And then it gave an almighty roar, and it ran off into the forest. Later sightings describe the creature as a large, hairy, black thing standing over 6 feet tall, and the most recent sighting of the Bennington Monster was in 2003.
Really?
Yep.
Jeez. That's well recent.
I know. Continued sightings of Bigfoot and even Big Feet, which I recently found out describes more than one Bigfoot.
A family of footages.
A family of Bigfoot is a big feet. So there's been continuous sightings of Bigfoot, continuous sightings of UFOs, strange lights in the sky, strange sounds in the mountain, odd odors as well, people generally describe in the Bennington Triangle. And these all continued for the next 4 decades
Tell you what,
until
if I was going up a mountain in a stagecoach and a big hairy 6-foot+ beast ploughed into the side of the stagecoach, I'd be making some hideous odours as well. I'm not surprised the mountain's full of strange, unpleasant odours. Everyone who
People
goes up
shit
there are like, oh my God.
Poop. But all of these sightings continued for over 4 decades until these mysterious disappearances started to happen. And the first mysterious disappearance, I read a lot of like sources and things like that, and when you look up the Bennington Triangle, it brings up 5 disappearances, and they're all very strange. But there's one before that, and it tends to get overlooked, but I thought I would include it because it's very strange. But it's not a disappearance as such, but it is a very strange death. So in 1943, Carl Herrick was hunting with his cousin Henry 6 kilometers northeast of Glastonbury Mountain, which lies at the center of the Bennington Triangle. The pair somehow got separated, and despite Henry's attempts, he couldn't find Carl. They hadn't been separated for very long, but he couldn't find Carl at all. So Henry ended up contacting the authorities to look for him. The search lasted 3 days before they found Carl's body, and it was in an area that wasn't particularly far from where the pair had been separated, and Henry had been certain that he'd kind of searched that area and was sure Carl hadn't been there. But Carl's body had been found surrounded by giant footprints, and his gun was also nearby with no bullets discharged. So at first, it was thought that Carl had been attacked by a bear due to the footprints. However, the footprints were much larger than that of a bear. And also, Carl's body appeared to be completely undamaged from the outside. So
you couldn't mistake a paw print for a footprint.
Yeah.
Like I think bear prints are very, very
circular and cute.
Yeah, like Pooh Bear.
Yeah. But also what they were saying is that a bear would generally hunts to kill. You don't really get homicidal bears that just
knock someone.
Sport. Yeah. So they didn't think it was a bear. So the autopsy actually revealed that Carl's cause of death was, quote, death by squeezing.
Oh.
He'd been squeezed so tight that his ribs had broken and punctured his lungs, which had led to him dying.
This is screaming Dyatlov.
Yeah, it is a little bit.
It is, isn't it?
Oh, yeah. Goodness. So yeah, death by squeezing. But it wasn't, the village weren't particularly perplexed by it. They was just like, oh, Carl's dead. You know, there's only 8 of us left now. And they kind of brushed it. Yeah. They kind of brushed it aside. It wasn't like I think they were so used to the mysteries of what happened in Glastonbury Mountain that they was like, oh, well, I told him not to go up there.
Yeah.
Told him. 2 years later, 74-year-old Middie Rivers went missing. So Middie Rivers was an experienced hiker and hunter, and he went missing on November the 12th, 1945, while he was guiding a group of 4 hunters on this mountain trek, Glastonbury Mountain, through the Bennington Triangle. He was very familiar with the trail. He walked it all the time. But the hikers said that Middie was kind of ahead of the pack. So he was leading the trail and he was walking up ahead. And then they travelled through an area of the trail which was called Hell Hollow Brook.
Oh.
I think you'd steer clear of that.
I would not go anywhere near that.
No, Hell Hollow Brook. And this was on the long trail. And as they kind of got up to a curve, Middie disappeared around the corner, and then the rest of the hikers, thinking, you know, that they'll see him as they turn the corner, didn't. Middie had just kind of disappeared off the trail, and like almost as if into thin air. So they had thought that perhaps he'd just been a lot quicker than them and that they would catch up at some point at the end of the trail. But they never came across him. Firemen, local volunteers, and the US Army all searched for Middie for over a month. The only clue they ever found was one rifle cartridge. They didn't find any body, and the case still remains unsolved.
Jeez.
Middie disappeared.
Oh, Middie.
A year later, on December the 1st, 1946, an 18-year-old student at Bennington College named Paula Jean Welden told her roommates that she was going to the Long Trail for a hike. It was something she did quite a lot. She enjoyed going out. She kind of knew what she was doing. She grabbed her red coat and she set out. A local man named Lewis, he gave her a ride and then dropped her off a few kilometers from the trail. So there are a few eyewitness accounts on seeing her arrive at the trail. On arriving, she spoke with some hikers before she just ventured off on her own. But when she didn't show up for classes the next day, people started getting concerned. So she was reported missing and a huge search was launched. And this case is probably the most infamous case of all the disappearances because of the large scale search. Her father was very much like, I am going to throw everything at this and I am going to find her. So there was reward money that was offered. And it was also the case that forced Vermont to form its own state police force. Because until her disappearance, there was only ever one state investigator, and then they would just pull people in from different areas, and they relied mostly on volunteers and things like that to search. But this case in particular forced Vermont to form its own state police. The search lasted 4 weeks, but she was never found. Exactly 3 years after Paula's disappearance, 68-year-old World War I veteran James Tedford disappeared from a moving bus. And this one's really strange. He was visiting friends out of town and then was heading back on the bus to Bennington. 14 passengers confirmed that he'd been on the bus and had not gotten off at any stop. He was on the bus until the last stop, which was Bennington. And passengers said that he was there, he'd been asleep throughout the entire trip. But when the bus arrived at Bennington and the driver turned around to tell him, this is the last stop, you need to get off, he wasn't there. But his belongings were there. So his suitcase, little travel suitcase was there, and his ticket was on his seat. So nobody knows. He was never seen again.
Can you imagine if they found like all his clothes and everything just like on his seat?
Yeah, just his body gone.
Yeah, like it just gone.
Shoes
poof.
there.
Yeah.
But it was thought that James disappeared at a spot where the bus would have been passing through an area of the Bennington Triangle.
Oh, it sucked him out.
That who knows? Who knows? So to this day, there is still no explanation for his disappearances unless all 14 eyewitnesses were wrong and that they hadn't seen him, or they had, he'd gotten off, and even if he had got off though, he would have just gone home, or he would have gone to his wife or something.
Why didn't he take his belongings with him?
Yeah, he disappeared and nobody ever heard from him again. Nearly a year later, in October 1950, 8-year-old Paul Jepsen went missing. Well, his family had a farm. So they kind of stopped by this farm to tend the pigs, and they'd left Paul in the truck, just happily playing. And then when she got back from tending the pigs, Paul was gone. A large search was conducted, and his father had mentioned to police that in the days before Paul disappeared, he'd become obsessed with the Glastonbury Mountains. He's constantly telling his mum and his dad that he wanted to go to the mountains and that he needed to go to the mountains. And it was almost like they were like calling to him and luring him there. Scent dogs were sent out and they tracked his scent to an area that was kind of on a stretch of highway that near the Bennington Triangle. And then his scent just stopped. They tracked it to this area and then that was it. He was never seen, never found. Nobody knows what happened to little Paul Jepsen.
Hmm.
Approximately 2 weeks later, on October the 28th, Frida Langer vanished while on a camping trip in an area of the Bennington Triangle. She'd been out hiking with her cousin when she slipped and fell into just like, you know, a little body of water. It wasn't much. They were about a half a mile from their campsite, so she said to her cousin, "You stay here. I'm going to run back and I'm just going to change my clothes." But Frida never made it back to her camp. And her cousin started to get worried when Frida didn't return. And she searched for her and, you know, searched the local area. She went back to the camp and she hadn't been changed or anything. So she eventually called the police. The area was searched by the police, firemen, the military, and volunteers for weeks. And there was no sighting of her. Nobody ever found her body until 6 months later in the May, when Frida's body was found next to a body of water that had been extensively searched during their original search. Her body was too badly decomposed for them to get a true cause of her death. But they ruled it as a drowning. And that was just because her body was found next to water.
Yeah, next to the water.
But I don't think that kind of, if she'd drowned, how did she end up not in the water but on the side? You know, you're generally found in the water. But so her death was a mystery, although it was put down as a drowning.
Do you know how
was
far
found
from the water she was? Like
a few feet.
Could it have been that the level of the water was higher and she sort of washed up to the edge and then
potentially
water went down? Or
it wasn't. Yeah, it wasn't a stream with a current or anything like that.
But I mean,
just
even
a body of water.
so, how would she have ended if she was going back to get changed? How would she have ended up in a body of water anyway? Unless it was a murder and someone pushed her in and drowned her in there.
Yeah.
Strange.
So that's what we'll discuss next. So those are the 5 disappearances that kind of spark the most mystery around the Bennington Triangle.
Yeah.
So as you can imagine, there are many theories and speculation on the disappearances. So here are some of the practical theories, and these are the theories that generally I would go to figure out some of these things. So one is that there was a serial killer on the loose in those 5 years, which could be plausible, but a lot of people think that it wasn't a serial killer because the ages, the sexes, everything was very different. So normally you find a pattern with a serial killer and they have a type of profile that they go for. A type of MO. But this, it was any age, any sex, and different means of death as well. So don't know whether it was a serial killer or not. Another explanation has to do with the area's history as a mining town. The mountainside is said to be littered with unmarked mine shafts, which could cause hikers, if they go off the trail, to plummet, you know, into these mine shafts and be lost. And that could explain the missing people and that no bodies were ever found. Another factor is people are saying that because of the odd wind pattern on the mountains, what I found is that it says most places have a wind pattern that influences how plants grow, and we don't consciously acknowledge it, but this pattern of growth is how we orientate ourselves outdoors. So you might not be aware that you're doing it, but based on how foliage is, you think, oh, that's the right way. But because it's so scattered on the mountain, people can become very disorientated. And it says that even experienced hikers can become very disorientated due to this random growth. And there's also a theory as well about hypothermia. So all of the disappearances happened in the last 3 months of the year, so in winter. And it said that when you experience hypothermia, there is something called terminal burrowing, and it's a instinctive survival behavior that drives people to find someplace small and remote to huddle. And it gets people out of the wind, and it gets people to an area of safety, and it might provide a little bit of warmth that helps slow the hypothermia down, but it usually kicks in too late. And what it actually does, it just makes that person harder to find.
Yeah.
So that's another explanation as to why these people had kind of gone missing.
Yeah. I mean, that's interesting what you were saying about the need to burrow and put yourself somewhere small. Because, I mean, look at like all the homeless people that we've got in London. They're always in doorways.
Well, yeah, it's shelter,
So,
isn't it? Yeah, it gets you out of the wind. And
it's, you know, it's a natural urge to want to put yourself somewhere sort of small and out the way of the wind, because the wind is the worst bit, isn't it?
Oh gosh, yeah. And when you're freezing, you want to huddle, don't you?
Yeah.
All of your limbs and everything. So you find the smallest space you can to huddle into.
Ball up, get out the wind. Yeah.
But yeah, like I say, it says that this instinctive behaviour, it kicks in too late. You're already going to die.
Yeah.
And
they won't be able to find you.
Yeah, then it just makes you very difficult to find. So these other theories now are more supernatural.
Okay.
And so there's a theory around the disappearances, obviously, that it could be UFOs. And as I mentioned earlier, all of the disappearances happened in the last 3 months of the year. They all happened around the same sort of time, around 3 or 4 o'clock in the afternoon.
Okay.
And some of the people had been wearing red. So Paula had a red coat on. Little Paul Jepsen, he had a little red coat on. And people now, when they actually take that trail to hike, they're actually told not to wear red.
Really?
Yeah.
Blimey.
It's become a thing that if you wear red, you're going to disappear. So people just don't.
I bet there's people that tempt fate and do it.
Never done. I wouldn't know. Never seen again.
Yeah, exactly.
There's also the theory that it's the Bennington Monster, or the Bigfoot that is sighted in the area, especially as Carl Herrick, and when his body was found, it was found with these crushing injuries. So people speculate that it could perhaps be the Bennington Monster that's behind all of the disappearances. And then there is the theory of the man-eating stone. And this, like I mentioned in the beginning of the podcast, that this was made popular by the Native American folklore about these enchanted cairns. And it is believed that people stand on these stones because they're a higher the elevation. People stand on the stones to maybe get a better view, or maybe try and orientate themselves. And then the stone turns. It's more that it's not so much that the stone opens up and eats them, it's that the stone turns liquid, and then people are kind of consumed into this liquid stone type thing. So that's another theory.
I like that idea. I mean, I don't like it. It's terrifying, but yeah.
The man-eating stone.
Yeah, that's cool.
The prehistoric stones that nobody knows how they got there or why they got there.
Yeah.
I've definitely put some pictures up. Yeah. I read an entire webpage, and it was very, very, it was quite dull to read because there was a lot of information about these stones and the process that they went to date this moss that had grown, and it was very, very lengthy. But what I took from it was that they couldn't really date it or explain how it got there, but it was prehistoric.
Maybe it was just ideal conditions for it, and it's just been preserved all that time.
Who knows? Nobody knows. The experts didn't know.
It's a portal, and you can go through time, and you can go to different places and things like that. And that's what I believe, and I stand by it. That's what it is.
But whatever the reason, these strange things are still happening to this day, and those mysterious disappearances are still unsolved. So nobody knows what.
Has anyone disappeared since?
No, not that I could find.
We don't know.
No, there's been, we don't know. There's been more sightings of UFOs there. There's been more recent sightings of like the Bigfoot and things like that. There's been strange happenings there, but I couldn't find any sort of current missing people in the Bennington Triangle. I think after this, people have gone, I just won't wear red, and I won't go in the last 3 months of the year.
Yeah. No one's turned up in like recent, in recent times. in local towns that looks like a mossy stone dressed up in like a red hoodie or something, you know, going down the street?
No.
Okay, so they're not
No.
taking over. Okay.
They're not taking. No, the enchanted cairns aren't
Yeah,
taking over.
enchanted
Do not
cairns.
worry.
Mm,
Yeah. But yeah, that's the story of the Bennington Triangle.
that's cool. Yeah,
I thought you'd enjoy that one.
It sounds a lot like the Bermuda Triangle, but drier because it's on a mountain.
Yes.
Whereas
Not so many ships.
yes, yeah, yeah, mate, yeah.
Yeah.
I wonder if
No
they're
ship
linked anywhere.
disappearances.
And what's the link between all these triangles and things? Why are they always like a triangle? There's something
We'll
to
dig
that.
in deeper.
Oh, mind you, saying that, there's the whole mystery of like crop circles.
Yes.
So, you know, they're going for shapes. We've got a triangle, got circle. Oh my God, it's PlayStation. They're taking over.
There's a square.
Look out for the square and cross, people. Goodness. Oh, that was great. I like that. Yeah, it feels like it's been a while since we've had like a weird one.
Yeah, I thought so. We've done a lot of true
murders.
crime recently. Yeah.
Yeah.
Done a lot of perplexing true crime stories, so I thought we'd go for a bit of a
Well,
supernatural one.
let us know what you want, guys. Let us know if there's any particular stories you want. I know Sarah posted a poll recently which said that you're super interested in the true crime, so we have tried to go more that way. Let us know if you want some stranger ones. I have got a really strange one coming up which Sarah and I briefly discussed this morning.
Yeah, that'll be I'm excited for that one,
but I think we'll do that in a blam because it'll be a shorter but by no means bland episode. It'll be a good one. That
all right. No, you're welcome. Bye.
Bye.
If you have enjoyed listening to our episodes, make sure you rate us and leave us a review on whatever platform you are listening.
We absolutely love hearing from you guys. So you can also help support our show by donating to our Buy Me a Coffee link. We will make sure that you get a massive shout out and a big thank you in our next week's episode.
You can also follow us on social media at Perplexed Podcasts. We're on Facebook, Instagram, and if you want to see more videos and blooper reels, subscribe to our TikTok and YouTube channels.
You can also email us your stories at perplexedpodcasts@gmail.com.
And you can find all the relevant links in the episode descriptions. Thanks for listening. Bye.
Bye.